Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of True Say with CBJ, and I am your host, Jerno. In today's episode, I had the privilege of sitting down with the remarkable Dr. Ismail Badjie for a conversation that traverses a multitude of fascinating topics. We kick off by delving into Dr. Ismail's journey to prominence, where he shares his passion for public speaking and how it played a pivotal role in his rise. We also explore his recent book, Life as a Hyphen, a poignant reflection on growing up between two cultures, the Gambia and the USA. Dr. Ismail wrote this book as a means to explain his life experiences to his daughter through heartfelt letters. But that's not all. Our discussion delves into the world of healthcare as Dr. Ismail sheds light on the process of medication development and the importance of industry regulation. We also get a glimpse into his healthcare company, InnovaRx, and its transformative impact on the healthcare in the Gambia. Dr. Ismail shares personal insight on mental health, parenting styles, and coping strategies, including the profound benefits of physical fitness and fasting. As we wrap up this episode, I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Ismail for sharing his wisdom and experiences with us. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Thank you.
All right. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ismail Badjie. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm good, brother. How are you? Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I'm great. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Appreciate you taking your time to, for me to pick up on your brain a little bit.
No, I look forward to learning from you as well, too, man. I think just from listening to you, I've learned quite a bit just from the previous episode. So looking forward to it.
Really. That's nice. I'm glad that you're listening. It means a lot, honestly. But so I think this is the first time we're meeting. I think, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I think I've actually been into Innova before. But yes. I think maybe we just talk like briefly, but never really, get into it that much. So yeah. No,
I agree. Gambia is one of those places where you could know somebody, kind of, who they are, but you don't know them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I definitely haven't had an opportunity to speak to you in depth. So yeah, definitely a pleasure.
Well, I've been watching, I've been watching social media and everything, and I think you've kind of gain this, presence online, especially with public speaking and everything. And it really got my attention because I will get into that, what really got my attention, but I just kind of want to understand, because you're known as this healthcare professional, right? But it seemed like now you're everywhere, you're talking, you're doing a lot of interviews, and I think that's very, very amazing, that what you're doing. But has that that transition, like, how did it come about? Like, was this like something planned for you, or did it just kind of naturally, came during your time in the Gambia,
Yeah, no, I think it's an excellent question, Cherno, because I've always, naturally, I resist being put in a box, right? I've always considered myself to be, healthcare is what I do, it's not who I am. Okay. Right. So I think it's just natural that Gambia, if you're a science student, you go do something in the sciences and you stay as a scientist or a healthcare professional. But honestly, my whole life, I've always been way more than what I was academically doing. So even things like public speaking, different leadership roles, I kind of grew up doing a lot of those things. Most people that even knew me in high school knew that I used to go and do like youth advocacy, like talk to boys or girls in the neighborhood about a lot of social issues. So I've done a lot of that. I started that very early, but obviously healthcare is why I moved to Gambia. And I just started noticing that we don't communicate honestly and effectively as healthcare professionals. So it just allowed me to kind of tap into that space a little bit.
Yeah, because from my point of view, like you've, I think like looking, from what I see online, like you have this fascinating wide range of experiences and a lot of achievement also. And, you have this way of communicating with people, and it really connects, from I've listened to a lot of people talk, like Tony Robbins and all these other, famous motivational speakers and what's so not, and entrepreneurs. But there was just something with you, I guess maybe because maybe we're from the same world. So I kind of, really understand. So the way you communicate and connect with people, like, it's just, it's really amazing. I think it's fascinating. And by the way, congratulations on your book. Also, you just wrote a book called Life as a Hyphen. Can you tell me a little bit about the book? Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of similarities, and thank you for that too. There's a lot of similarities in terms of why I even decided to write the book, and a lot of things that I've talked about. Obviously, I'm Gambian, but I've also lived very different in terms of my life experiences, because my family moved back to Gambia when I was 7. From the USA, and I lived in Gambia from 7 to 17, which is like formative, because that's when I started learning Wolof. That's when I started going to Dada. That's why I started going to Mrs. Ndaus, then to Gambia High. So I had a very good Gambian experience for 10 years. And then I left and got integrated back into America as a Gambian American in America. So my whole life has been going back and forth between two very different cultures, which make me who I am. So that's not unique to me. A lot of people, even if you're not two countries, it could be two tribes. Your mom could be Wolof, your dad could be Mandinka. So we're always a combination of a lot of things. But sometimes society will just see you as like just based on your name and just put you in one box and think that's all you are.
Sure.
So I decided, hey, let me write. But I think something we have in common, we have daughters, which I think changed my life in a way that it made me realize I don't know my parents as much as I wanted to. And it would have been helpful if they wrote while they were actually living their life experiences, because it'll be a gift to me. So actually, part of the book is me writing letters to my daughter, explaining in real time what I'm going through as a 30-something-year-old Black man in the world. So my daughter is definitely the motivation, and that's who I really wrote the book for, to be honest.
So yeah, I mean, I haven't read the book, honestly. But I did my little bit of research on what's it about, and I've been on your Instagram page, kind of just, scrolling, looking at, what's really about. And it seemed like it's some sort of a roadmap, to just growth, and self-discovery. And I think it's very, it's like an adventure, you know what I mean? And, but what was the moment, like that made you really just want to say, okay, like I wanted to tell my story, like, I wanted to share it with the world, because it takes a lot also to just want to, put it all out there, especially like culturally where I'm from, where we're from. It's like not something that, that we do normally.
Yeah. So I think I found out at some point as an adult that I'm able to be more honest with myself and with my thoughts, my feelings when I'm writing it. Because also culturally we could be, because we're African men, certain families, we're not programmed to communicate what we're thinking, how we're feeling. Sometimes we're not even giving permission to say what we really think, because it's like, yo, this is the family you come from. Right. So I realized, okay, when I started writing, it became therapy for me, but it got to a point where I was like, I know I'm not the only one in the world going through this. So there has to be somebody out there who's probably trying to figure out spirituality, which is why I love the conversation you had with Mamadou, the last time, because so much of it resonated with me, because I was on that journey at some point trying to figure out a lot of different things. So I just realized that I'm able to be more honest writing. And it's something like anything in life, the more you do it, the better you are in doing it. And being able to also bring two different people, because I have African-American friends and family. I have very Gambian, but they don't also communicate. So most of the times there's a lot of misunderstanding. So I really felt I was in a unique position to talk about experiences from both different cultures in that way.
That's true. That's true. That's amazing. And So I would just like to take it back, because earlier I was talking about what really got me to wanted to even talk to you in the first place.
Yeah.
Because when I was, I remember the video that you made with Gano, I think was about something about, if you listen to this video, it would change your life. I think it was one of those. And in the end, you were talking a lot about courage, right? Mm-hmm. And I've watched a lot of motivational speakers in my life, because I've also went through so many, obstacles in my life where I was just trying to figure out, where to, or who to listen to kind of give me that boost, you know what I mean, to figure out what I want to do. But when I listened to that end, you were talking a lot about courage, and it kind of made me think about my own fears. Because I remember even in the beginning when I started the podcast, I had like 3 episodes in, and like all the doubts started kicking in. I'm like, I'm not even good at this. Like, what am I doing? Like, where is this going? And so if you could explain, like, how do you suggest for somebody to begin their journey, like, towards cultivating courage?
Well, God, or whatever spiritual power you believe in, it starts there, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, one thing I learned about you too, I aspire to learn in the Quran and understand it the way you do, but in Ayatul Kusri, Yahlamu ma baina aydihim wa ma khalfahum, right? Yeah. As in, that to me is one of the most profound things. And I think there's a direct link to courage, because if somebody who knows everything that happens in the world, knows what's in front of you and what's behind you, right? It almost removes fear. True. Because, if it's for better, he knows why. If it's for worse, he knows why. You just can't be stagnant. So, and a lot of times, and it's funny about that speech, I tell people, I did not prepare that speech. I did not write that speech. It felt like an out-of-body experience, because I was just speaking what was inside of me at that moment. And Gano did a good job with packaging it, because so much of my decision to quit my job in the USA, kind of invest every single thing I had into a company, choose Gambia to do business, healthcare is messy. Only courage and you really believing that God is using you as an instrument allows you to make certain things that most people will tell you don't do it, or you'll find a reason not to do it. But I don't know. It's just one of those things where if you really believe, if you have faith, God put the idea of the podcast in you. He actually trusted you with it. So at that point, it's like a permission to just go. So for me, it makes you closer to God in a very non-religious but very spiritual way.
Yeah, because, sometimes, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes you feel like there's a lot of other things in your, like, for example, in my mind, like when it comes to the fears, everything started, for example, from childhood. Because I like some of the moments I would remember, it's like maybe I was not a person who was able, like you were talking about that communication thing, that we were not allowed to sometimes communicate, right? And because everything is kind of decided for you in a way, like you're going to be this and you're going to be that, and you don't have a voice in a way, So as I grew, it feels like everything that I do, there's just so much questions, even though, you leave everything to God because he knows what's in front and what's behind. But it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like sometimes like an overthinking, and it gets to a part where you just end up not even doing anything after all. You know what I mean? So, but
yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, life is funny because people's perception of you, and sometimes our perception of ourselves, we tend to be harder on ourselves than people, right? Because a lot of the feelings that you have, I wake up some days and I'm like, I mean, I don't know what else to do as a CEO. Running a company is difficult. All of us go through those phases. I think it's actually good because it keeps you humble, but also it keeps you hungry, because you feel like, okay, there's so much to learn that you don't get comfortable, right? Which is why you never decide. I very, very seldom do I talk about success, because I honestly don't see it the way people do. I just feel like if you understand, okay, my purpose is to create conversations that people could find value in. You don't measure it the way we measure a lot of worldly things, but that's not a bad thing. I think doubt is good. I think even a healthy dose of fear is good, and you never want to feel like you've arrived.
True.
Because then it could go away very, very quick. It could go away very quick.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess it's just kind of all about, you know, just keep pushing. You know what I mean? Because like for me, example, with what I'm doing, there's always like every conversation, like every person that I'm trying to talk to, I try to, it's basically like testing my, like basically to challenge my fears, you know, because like every person that I talk to is like, there's this fear of, you know, like, can I do it? Can I do it? Can I do it? And every time I do it, that feeling I get, you know, it feels like growth, you know what I mean? Because so it's a good feeling at the end of the day, but it's like you said, there's no, you know, there's like no end to it. You know, I just, you know, you just got to keep moving. Yeah. But, so I want to take it back a little bit, you know, to some of the early age, you know, because we already started talking, and, you know, I usually don't like to do introduction because I think it's, I don't know, it's just too like a journalist thing. I don't know. But so for me to understand who you are, I want you to take me back, because I want to understand the young Dr. Ismail, you know, the one who was running around in his house, you know, some of the interests and some of the moments, even traumas that, you know, some of those things that made you to who you are today.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things. Obviously, the USA is the first country I knew.
Yeah.
So my dad is a retired ambassador. He was a diplomat for some time. So we left when I was very, very young, Gambia. I was born in Banjul, but I don't remember Banjul. The first country I remember is the USA. So I moved back to Gambia at the age of 7. Completely from New York, did not speak Wolof, did not know anything about the Quran or religion. And that's kind of where my journey starts. But also I come from a family of 5, so I'm a middle child as well too. And you know what they say about middle children, most of the times they're the rebellious ones.
Yeah.
We like being alone. I have an older brother, so I oftentimes didn't want to be like my older brother. I had a younger brother. So I always wanted to at least be a good role model for him. So a lot of who I am comes from that as well. Academically, school was never difficult. But I never took school serious because I was into sports. I was into video games. I was into extracurricular activities. So a lot of things that most of the young kids at the time were into. That's honestly what I was into, but it was something that's been constant, has always been my deep hunger to understand the why behind a lot of things. I've never been a conformist. My parents will tell you, I need to understand why something is for it to make sense, right? And I think that's why I even struggled in school, because I'm like, this is not challenging me to know how things work. They're asking me to memorize something and pass the exam. So it's not filling me up. So I kept on looking for it elsewhere. I think
this
also
this was in the US or?
No, in Gambia.
In Gambia at that time, okay.
In Gambia, yeah. So when we got back, lived in Pipeline, then we moved to Conifing. So I did Mrs. Nose from primary 3 to grade 9, and then left and went to Gambia High School for high school. But I think in terms of childhood, now that I think about it, and I talk about this in my book, is I got used to being alone or being alone with my thoughts at a very early age. And sometimes that changes something in somebody, because you don't lean too much on other people for emotional support.
True.
You psychologically get used to self-soothing. You compartmentalize. You never get too high. You never get too low, because you're oftentimes just trying to figure things out on your own. And that has stuck with me to this day. I like being alone. I like, thinking as well. And most people that have relationships with me will tell you he's not the best communicator. You're not going to hear from him every single day. He's not going to call every single day.
Even though you're a speaker, you're not a communicator.
I'm an effective communicator when it comes to, I need to communicate with a group of crowd. I know how to articulate my thoughts, but I'm actually an introvert. A lot of people don't know that. I like solace. I like being alone. A lot of times I like being alone, just thinking and processing things.
Yeah.
But I think that it has a lot to do with my childhood, for sure.
Were there any traumatic experiences that you remember also that kind of shaped you also?
I wouldn't say traumatic, but obviously family dynamics, right? I think Gambia, our society, we normalize things like even your dad, for example, being at home every single day, right? Because if he's working, I mean, food's on the table, you have a roof over your head. You don't get to know your parents, and you don't realize how parenting styles or relationship with your parents could affect you until you become a parent and you start going through the cycles where you're like, yo, I'm pretty sure your daughter, even if something is wrong, because you're around her all the time, she doesn't have to communicate it for you to be like, yo, she's not as joyful as she is today, or she's not laughing. I think those kind of things that we're missing in our childhood, because my dad was very busy working. My mom was, you have 5 kids to take care of. It's also a privilege because it's not traumatic. Like I didn't go through physical abuse, verbal abuse, house insecurity. But it definitely shapes who you are, and just kind of how you see the world.
Yeah, because I know in your book you'd kind of delve into this, I think you call it this deeply rooted beliefs. I guess certain beliefs that were kind of what do we call it? Certain beliefs that we have in our culture that kind of shape sometimes the way we are. Like what were those deeply rooted beliefs for you that you think?
So here's the thing, and I think you talked about it on your last episode in terms of this idea of
I like the fact that you keep like saying my no,
it's
mean that you listen very good.
It was wisdom. I even text Moda afterwards like, yo, that resonated with me because you guys were talking about spirituality, religion, and culture. And I feel like there's always been this intersection. You don't know what's white, what's black, what's gray. That has always been around. But also, I think us men in the Gambia and the way we're raised, sometimes it could set us up it could be a disadvantage as we grow because we insulate and protect. Most of the times, most women in our cultures go through harder roads in terms of what they cannot do. Society is more forgiving to men than it is to women because a man, you always get a second chance in society, sometimes third chance. But for a woman, it's different. Like there's so many rules that you have to abide by and God forbid something happens. So those are some of the things I struggle with, but also I had to go through a journey of understanding Islam and religion from my perspective and not from a perspective of somebody else telling me what it should be, what it should not be as well too. So I think I definitely went through that journey. And now obviously with my daughter, my wife and I are starting to have a conversation. How do we introduce God to her? How do we introduce religion? Because on the same side too, being that I am Muslim and Islam was something I grew up in, it protected me from a lot of things that I think if I didn't come home to Gambia, I would have been a different human being if I was born and raised in the USA as well too. So it's just figuring out a lot of things in society that you have to understand, and then you pick and choose which ones you're going to apply to your life and which ones you're not going to apply to your life.
So how was your understanding or perspective of what Islam is right now?
It was anything that our ustaz told me. To be honest, I learned the Quran blindly as well too. All the surahs that I got to memorize, because memorization, like, is something, it translates to school too. Because then you start memorizing your notes and you could remember it. Yeah. But I had no context of what I was reciting. Wolof is not my first language. English was my first language. So Arabic was very difficult to understand. So I, like a lot of people in Gambia, I learned the Quran blindly. and its interpretation was that of from whatever the Ustaz says, all the stories and things of that nature. I think I had to get, when I was older is when I started reading scripture. Again, to start understanding like, oh, there's certain things in the Old Testament that is exactly the same. It's the same message that's coming back in the Quran as like, yo, we told you guys this before, but we're going to tell it to you again. So yeah, I've been on the relearning process. I think even now that journey doesn't stop, but I never reached a level where I understood what it was that I was reciting. I understood what it was, what it meant. It was just conformity.
Yeah, I think it was the same way for me. Like I went to boarding school, and because that's the only thing I went. I didn't go to English school. So by 9, I memorized. And even with memorizing, I didn't know anything about what I was reading, you know. So it was like, I wouldn't say forcefully, but I mean, in a way it's like that. It's like, because you have to memorize it, otherwise you're not going home. So so as growing up, it kind of had this, I had this resentment even towards the book. I think I talked to Gano with it, even when we did a podcast together. There was this resentment towards the Quran, because you're like, why do I have to learn it? So as I grow, I can say for the last 4 or 5 years, that's when I really invested my time to actually try to really do the tafsir, you know, the interpretation, to really understand even who I am as a Muslim, you know what I mean, or what it means to be a Muslim. You know, culturally, Gambia, like you said, you know, whatever the Ustaz says, you just tend to go with that. And most of the times, you know, the way they used to preach, the way they used to teach, I think compared to like now, it's very different, you know, to the way that you're supposed to do da'wah, which is preaching, you know what I mean? So I guess, yeah. I mean,
and something else that you mentioned too, which I appreciated hearing, that is how separating Islam as a spiritual vehicle versus Arab culture, right?
Exactly.
I've always struggled with that, because once again, it's just like, it was presented in such a way where you're like, okay, what is Arab culture versus what is actually the word of God that came down to the Quran, that nobody owns that religion, right? I think I've always struggled with that a little bit, especially when it comes to me as a Black person in the world. And I talk about that from a spirituality and what religion, how people have used religion to not even advocate for Black people being treated equally, which sometimes, if you're not careful to know that that is not the religion, that's the people who have propagated those messages. I think it's very important to understand that, because sometimes it could lead to resentment on certain aspects. That's more, you know, Arab culture.
Yeah, just an hour ago, I was at work, and I have these 2 Moroccan co-workers, you know, but one of them is Arab, but the other one is Aramaic, you know, like the old language of the Bible. And he asked me a very important question. He was like, you know, Shaitan, which is Iblis, he had a conversation with God in the Quran, you know, and that conversation is written in Arabic, because Quran is written in Arabic, right? And he asked me a good question. He's like, so in the day of judgment, like, is Shaitan going to speak Arabic or not? I'm like, actually, I don't know. I never really thought about that, you know? So he was basically, his point was just trying to say that, you know, there's this proudness in the Arab culture that, you know, that they own the Quran, or the Prophet is theirs, and all these other things. It's like, and he's just saying everything that kind of you're saying. It's like, you know, like Islam and the religion in the book, that's God's, and it's kind of everyone's, you know, so it doesn't have to be, you know, you shouldn't teach an Arab culture in Gambian culture or in Chinese culture, because everyone has a culture, but the lifestyle of Islam, now that's a different thing, you know, trying to emulate the Prophet or emulate what of the, you know, the teachings of him is a completely different thing. So yeah, I understand that completely.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you meet a lot of people who are not Muslims, but they're genuinely good people, right? And that's the part too, where as I've matured, I've learned to separate those things, where I have some of my Indian friends who practice Hinduism. I have people who practice Buddhism. I have Christians, where even if you don't tell me what you are, I can have a conversation or interaction with you and know that like you are right with whatever it is, spirit that's permeating from you to me is something positive. There's nothing dark about you. So those are some of the things that I think transcends a lot of the, classification of how we, worship God and, just understand why we're here.
That's just a lack of knowledge, because as I even learned deeper about Islam, there's this hadith that when, God talks about that, sometimes even his wali, like his people, you can find them in the non-Muslim. So like, just because you're a Muslim does not make you, everything, like, because God created all, the same, of course, the only thing that's different is who's more pious and in front of him. But apart from that, like, anybody could be a friend of God, anybody can be wali of God. And so whether he's a Chinese or an Indian or anybody, so yeah man. But I want to just kind of venture, because you've kind of been talking a lot about economic innovation and economic growth and all these things in the Gambia, and I guess all around in Africa. But what specific experiences or observation that kind of led you to realize that, that Gambia or Africa kind of has been dealing with, I guess I would say Gambia, because your company, InnovaRx Gambia, that just more than beyond just healthcare. Like, what are some of the practical and lasting solutions that you see, to tackle these challenges? Yeah.
One of the biggest, anybody you talk to Gambia you could always paint a very dark and gloomy picture about Gambia, lack of opportunities and X, Y, and Z. But if you think about it, right, most people cannot name 2 or 3 companies that lasted 2 generations in the Gambia that are Gambian, right?
Yeah.
There's a problem there. Most companies are not hiring enough individuals because your company is not growing enough to even have 20 employees without being a big company like a bank, an institution where it's funded. So much of our problem, yet we're spending a lot of money in the Gambia. Anybody who tells you, Halis Amutsudekabi, there's not money in the Gambia, hasn't lived in Gambia.
True.
The money is just not circulating within our communities, meaning we are not doing a good job giving ourselves an opportunity to create wealth. And oftentimes when I talk about economic development, some people may confuse it as, I'm anti-non-Gambian. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is any country or continent that you go in the world, the people of that place have a right to generate wealth and circulate that wealth intentionally amongst each other. So if I own a healthcare facility, you own a banking institution, guess where I'm taking my money? To your banking institution. When you need healthcare, you come to me. If somebody else is running a school, we take our kids there. So that money keeps circulating within the community and it gives people an opportunity to actually make something out of themselves. That is what I noticed was lacking in Gambia, because you and I know most of the non-Gambians don't even respect Gambian labor to be able to provide job opportunities, right?
No.
And now it's getting to the point where they are bringing in their own labor to do jobs that Gambians are capable of doing, right? So everywhere in the world, they tell you Africa is the next big thing, which it is. We're going to be the most populous continent on the world. We have the youngest population in the world. Everybody is coming to Africa, but we are sitting almost on the side and not intentionally participating in economic development, which has nothing to do with politics, because politics is not what changed countries. Even where you live right now, I'm sure you could observe that there are private companies who most people work for private companies, right?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things I just noticed. And, oftentimes it's easy for us to be abroad and criticize the Gambians are lazy, or there's no opportunities for young people, or, non-Gambians are taking over everything. At some point, we just have to be the generation who decides to put up a good fight and sacrifice, not for us to enjoy it, but so that our daughters could own something in the country before it's too late. And I'm afraid Gambia especially, that's where we're headed.
Yeah, because like when it comes to Gambia, it just seemed like such a like an impossible job almost. Like I remember just going to this last trip because I always go back home. Like when I was living in Saudi, every year I'm home because I never felt like, I always feel like I can never live anywhere else but Gambia because if I have to buy a property, if I have to invest in something, everything I wanted to make it home. But I would blame myself also because I've maybe never really tried hard enough. I've always lacked that courage, you know. But now as I'm starting to realize it more, you know, I've been hanging out with Musa and Mr. Jufure all the time, and he's always telling me that we need to go back and we need to go back. But you know, so it's always kind of been like that. But it just feels like such an impossible job. It feels like there's so much layers to it, and I'm sure when you just came there with your business, you must have dealt with a lot of, you know, those issues, especially they're seeing you coming from another country, for example. I don't know, like how was that, for example? Yeah.
It's not a thing of the past. I still do. I still do. Gambia is one of the worst places to do business because you're competing with two different elements. You're competing with every sector. There's probably a group of non-Gambians who dominate that sector whose main job is to make sure they keep dominating that sector, meaning infrastructure. They have access to capital, which you may not have, but also our fellow Gambians are still not rooting for each other the way that we should, right? And that's one of the biggest problems. Most countries, the moment I know, and the crazy thing is, like, if me and you meet in Sweden, for example, the moment we see our names, whatever is mine is yours. So we help each other a lot, I think, outside of Gambia. But the moment you transition to Gambia, there's this weird complex that happens where they feel like, yo, this guy just came from there and wants to tell me what I need to do, when you could actually have the best ideas to change a lot of our problems. They don't want that kind of solution because to them it's like you're trying to tell them what to do, when no, you've actually invested a lot of skill and learning that a lot of people will pay you a lot of money to never come back to Gambia, because that's also how the West is designed to harvest a lot of our talents. So it becomes very challenging just doing business. You know, the problems never cease, but so few of us just have to fight. But it's difficult, man. Cherno, it's so difficult.
But like it's like you have to, like, how can we change people's mentality? Does it have to be with the next generation? We just have to focus on them, and then we, like, how can we right now, for example, go there and be able to communicate with these people and just change their mindset? Like, how can one change that, you know? And for you also as a speaker, like, how would you use your platform, you know, to be able to make these, you know, important discussions?
Yeah. If you notice one thread in how I've been speaking, which I had to change, not even healthcare, because healthcare is, for the most part, healthcare and delivering healthcare, that's the easiest part of my job. Yeah. Right? The communication is now being honest about painting the reality, but also, and I don't own this concept of criticizing by creating. I think most places that refuse to change, you just start creating an alternative and being so hard-headed in delivering that alternative where even if the system doesn't want to change, the people are going to gravitate towards what they know is the right alternative. Because at the end of the day, especially from a business standpoint, your customers have nothing to do with the government most of the times, right? When building a business in Gambia, you actually don't want the government as your customer because it comes with a lot of complexities along that, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be more vocal about what it is we're creating and why we are creating it. And it's not only healthcare, like, Chandra, even what you're doing in terms of giving Gambians a platform to share ideas, where an 18-year-old Gambian who listens to 3 or 4 of what you're creating is going to be a smarter human being and will get information that they will not get at school, at home. So all of us just have to decide that we're going to collectively start speaking up, but also start creating alternatives. Not saying we want alternative, because sometimes that's where we fault. Any Gambian could criticize. It's like, let's say Ghana, for example. He could have been on social media, whatever QTV, GRTS does, he criticizes or look at the bad quality here and there. No, he just picked up his camera and started creating content that is quality, and the rest is history. Same thing with Musa, same thing with yourself. So all of us, we're doing it, which is why the fact that we're communicating as well too, most societies, that's how you change a society, because it starts with 1%. It's going to be extremely difficult for that 1%. Then it becomes 2%. Then it becomes 3%. Then it becomes 4%. And typically when you get to about 10% of the population who you have people who are willing to like start changing things, then you start seeing a difference, which it may take 20 years, 30 years. It may take 10 years. But I think it's happening in the Gambia though. And we're communicating with each other because we see each other as well. In a way that I don't think previously our older generation, everybody was busy being successful as an individual and not thinking a collective. Which I tell my dad that all the time. You guys were successful in chasing individual greatness. Make sure your family is okay, your kids are okay, but you never thought about the collective cause. When our generation, we have to think collectively. How do we move all of us together at the same time?
So you said something earlier about, all these other people from other countries, they're coming there, they're bringing their own labor work. And recently, and for me in this podcast, I like to be very raw. I like to say everything, like for example, the Chinese, and in Niger, the French and all these things, and there's been a lot of tension right now in Africa. Like what's your view on what's happening right now? Do you think what's happening in Niger and Burkina is going to be good for the whole continent, or is it something that's just going to be?
You know why it's dangerous too, and even add Senegal to it, because we've been sleeping on Senegal because a lot of this whole Ousmane Sonko, Macky Sall, they're fighting for which direction they want the country to go through that is void of Western influence, right? And it's tricky because I don't think Africa could progress without partners from the international world. We just have to recalibrate.
But why? Why do you think we cannot do it by ourselves?
Not in this generation, because I don't want us to live in a silo. I don't think nobody grows living in a silo. You just have to conduct and collaborate doing business on an equal playing field where there's mutual respect. There's not a dominance of like, I'm telling you how to run your country. No, it should be, okay, what do you want from me? What do I want from you? Let's make sure it's fair and we transact business. That's how the whole world operates. The only difference is with Africa, most of the times, even if they're giving you money, they're telling you, hey, I want you to go and do X, Y, and Z. Even if that's not your problem, they're giving you money to do what they think is right for you.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where the shift happens as well, too. So all these countries, it's just scary because everybody seems to be fighting for which direction they want to go. But the world order has to be reshuffled. If not, we are going to lose 100 years of what Africa is going to be if we don't fight for the terms of engagement now, which is why I think a lot of countries just are wanting that type of leadership, or they're wanting those type of conversations, because we honestly do need to wake up a little bit, because the same way they divided Africa a while back is the same way they're wanting to divide Africa again in terms of positioning themselves for the future of Africa.
It seems really like all the news. I've always been trying to stay away from the news and the politics because I think it's so depressing and around like everything that's happening in the world. I'm supposed to be talking to Maudo tomorrow, and it's going to be interesting to get into more politics. But it's just a bit scary because you see this guy who's 35 years old is running a country, and you're just like scared for him in a way, because because in my point of view, I'm looking at like, I'm scared for you. Like you seem like you have the courage to be doing this, but but like, how is it going to end? You know what I mean? I just don't have that belief that this is like a reality. Like if this will ever happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know, there's also a history of how it ends, because we saw Thomas Sankara, we saw Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah.
We have a lot of courageous African leaders where honestly, when they became too troublesome, they were killed and got rid of. Right. So it's definitely a risky proposition for them. But you just pray that also young people, we're just in such a fragile state. It feels that way, where the whole country, the region is very fragile. And then on the backdrop of that, you have a lot of young people who don't have unemployment. They don't have nothing to look forward to. So that's always a dangerous recipe.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You talked about earlier that, you know, you have a daughter. We both fathers. And I think it's like one of the most special things, but it's one of the most scariest things, having a daughter.
Yeah.
And we're talking about what's going on in this generation right now. But like, as a father for you, because I've been going through my own fears, you know, when she was born, actually even more recently, because every time I see her, the love that I feel. So, you know, how have you been kind of, you know, maybe just ensuring like her to grow up in a good society, to be able to have that confidence, that resilience, you know, to be able to, you know, just take like all the external pressures, everything that's going around the world. Like, how are you preparing this for her?
Man, that is so difficult. And I know you could relate to a lot of the feelings, sometimes scared for her. Yeah. Sometimes feeling insecure about my ability to father her the right way.
Exactly.
But I've always seen raising a child now as two buckets, right? Nature and nurture. There's certain things that are already in her by virtue of you, by virtue of her mother, that it's inseparable, right? That God has already taken care of. The nurturing part, I think that's the part that gets very, very scary, because from the moment they're born, they become a sponge that is taking in anything from their environment that could change them for better or for worse. And even going back to childhood traumas, going back to a lot of issues, they'll tell you sometimes the first 7 years of their life is so critical in terms of their pattern recognitions for love, how they respond to discomfort, being exposed to certain traumas, because they haven't reached a point where you could have an intellectual conversation with them.
Yeah.
So I've always started seeing my approach to fatherhood now in terms of, she's not old enough for me to have deep conversations with her yet. And nature is already in her, because I see things in me, in her, then you know that is your child. And you're like, man, that is me. Like, it could be something subtle, the way she smiles, or when she's upset, her body language, you're like, oh, that is me all the way. So all we need to do, I think, is focusing on the nurturing part, but also being able to be okay with what you're not good at. Because I could tell you my biggest sense of insecurity with her is because of InnovaRx and my life going back and forth. I'm repeating some of the childhood patterns that I faced where my dad was in and out of my life. And for her, I want to spend time with her every hour of the day. So I'm always leaning more on her mother to kind of provide that layer of protection in terms of what information can she watch, who could she go around with, right? You're protecting them, but you almost have to at this stage.
Yeah.
But man, there's not a single user manual. They don't come. Every child is different. So you just trust and honestly pray that the environment is okay enough for her to feel love, to feel valued, understand who she is. Because I think that's the fundamental component to a child, is safety and love. If you could provide safety and love for most of their childhood, everything else, when they grow older, I think it's easier to have conversations as well too. And girls, girls are special creatures, man, especially with their dads. There's a way they communicate with us as their fathers that's totally different from their mothers, but it's been an exciting journey, man. I've always used to think I wanted a boy, but having a girl is something I cannot describe, man.
It's the best. It's the best, man. Like, Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great feeling, man. Like I've even see my parents now in such a different way. Like I call my mom and I thank her so much. But like I want to spend more time with you, because like you said, like the way they raised us was such a different way. You know, me, I'm here every day. I see her every single day, and like my fear is not being able to be with her. You know, so I'm always trying to even connect more with my mom, because I'm like, yeah, there are times where we could have spent time, but we didn't. So let's connect more. Yeah, man. But so you're a doctor in pharmacy, like you have you're a doctor in pharmacist, and I kind of want to know, because I'm very curious about medicine, you know, especially in Gambia, for example. Like if you could just kind of run me through how medication works, like how, you know, especially modern medications, for example, you know what I mean? Because there's always this fear in my side on like what's inside of these medication, what are they doing to our bodies, you know? So if you could just kind of run me down on you know, some of these things, man. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And you know, one of the biggest misconceptions in Gambia is they actually, because Gambia doesn't have a lot of doctors or pharmacists, right?
Yeah.
So because it's a US, and I tell people the biggest difference in my learning is, so I did my first degree in chemistry. So I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry.
So you know how it works.
And then I have a doctor of pharmacy. So I studied for 8 years of my life from the moment where these medications are from plants up until they are manufactured into a tablet and put into your body. That's what we specialize in, as in every single medication that is available in the world. We have to know what happens when you put it in your body for a specific outcome.
Yeah.
So the biggest misconception or understanding is most medications, the actual medicinal component comes from plants. And a lot of people don't know that. So that's why when they tell you like herbal medicine, a lot of these things come from plants.
My conversation with Mo, he said that.
Yeah, that's the source of it. Antibiotic properties, things that could, honestly, that's the root of a lot of the medication, but you have to put it in a lab to refine it, right? Where once you identify, okay, this thing might be an antibiotic, right? Yeah. First thing to realize is not even medications, anything that is not water. The moment you put it in your system, it has a positive effect and it could have a negative effect, like food, because it's not a natural, your body is not producing it naturally, right? Yeah. So medications actually fall under the bucket of endogenous substances, meaning something that your body is not producing naturally that you have to ingest. Right? Which is why oftentimes we'll tell you, well, sometimes food is worse than bad medication, or sometimes food can be medication. Because if it's not water, if you put it in, there's a positive effect and there's a negative effect, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at why we take medications, meaning oftentimes something is wrong, there's an ailment that you want to remedy. Meaning your immune system or your system has lacked the ability to control something without external help. So all the medication is something that is external help to help your systems fix something, right? That's the main, that's what a prescription actually means, just a solution, right? So from that perspective, then you break it down into, is this something that is short-term, or is this something that is long-term? Short-term meaning I have an infection, I have a headache sometimes, or I have something that you take medications for X amount of days or hours, and then that ailment goes away. So that's where you put a lot of your medications into something that you're treating something acute. Malaria, a viral infection, you have a headache that's not related to a chronic condition, right? So that's what you're taking care of. Majority of the people take medications for the rest of their life because they have a chronic condition that sometimes could be genetic in nature, right? So these are high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, things that no matter how clean you eat, no matter how athletic you are, no matter, it's nature. right? You come with it. So meaning your kidneys are not functioning well enough to keep your blood pressure down. Your heart is not functioning enough to keep your blood pressure down. So the only outcome is you take medicine to regulate it or you die early. And which is why most people back in the day never lived to be a long, right? Because they had conditions where without medication, they just died early. So to see a human being live to be 50 years old, it didn't happen back in the day because things just happen. But research is gotten so much better. And I think individuals like Dr. Nene Sala, what they do allows people like me to do what we do, because that's where a lot of the research comes. And then once they've proven that, okay, for example, this is safe and effective, then it comes to us to be in charge of giving it to the right patient at the right time for the right condition, right?
Yeah.
In an ideal setting, everything I discuss in Gambia, take it and throw it out the window because Gambia is the wild, wild west.
Yeah, because,
when it comes to
because, there's this thing too, like, okay, maybe the Tylenol works, but Alvedon doesn't work, or this one doesn't work. Like, this is better than that. And that always kind of got my curiosity in like the companies that makes them, the manufacturers, like which one is true or not. And then the times we live now where you see like ads everywhere, like everyone is telling you that their painkiller is better or their antibiotic is better. Like how should I receive that information? Like how should I take that in?
Skeptically. First of all, you should always see things that everything is a business, right? Medication manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing, hospital systems. Yeah. Every single aspect of healthcare is a business. And the number one rule for business is don't lose money and make as much money as possible. Yeah. Right. So even marketing, let me tell you how cynical pharmaceutical marketing is. Tylenol or Panadol, for example, that is actually not the chemical name of the medication. That is something that somebody created a name that sounds nice and took it. It's as if you branding water as Cherna. But everybody has access to water. Yeah. Right. And then because you package it a certain way, now you could charge money for the same chemical molecule more than somebody else can. Right. Yeah. So it's all marketing, even drug expirations, right? A tablet, once it's manufactured, the manufacturer could tell you this is going to expire in 5 years. There is zero truth to the fact that that pill, if kept in a safe condition, expires in 5 years. But if you have a business and you say, no, this is good for 10 years, it's bad for business because then people won't buy this every 10 years.
And that's just the issue. That the business part is just the scary part because like everybody's just advertising and it's like marketing and just making us buy everything. Even not only even in medicine, like it was with everything, So it's a bit
But you police it. And I think that's why it's also critical that sometimes the right people are in the right space. Because, for example, our healthcare, our pharmaceutical sector, for example, in Gambia, is not dominated by Gambians. And most people that are in the sector don't have a single scientific degree. They're business people. Yeah. So if you're a business person, your goal is to sell as much as you can. Your goal is not to make sure if you need only one medication, why are they selling you 5? But if they sell you 5, it's more profitable, so they're going to sell you 5 when you just need one medication. Right? So it definitely calls for a lot of scrutiny, but that's some of the things we're trying to change.
So when you came to Gambia, I think it's just me. Like when I was doing my research, like did he had to go to like every pharmacy? Did you go to Mala Chemist and Badjie Pharmacy and just kind of see like how their business work and how it works? Because I remember I came to your place, and I'm never sick a lot or like even go to a checkup or anything. I think you were that was the first place I've actually ever been to, and not only just to go for a checkup, but to even feel comfort and trusting, because I told like the person who was checking me, I told them, Like all the issues and all the things that was going through me, or substances or whatever that I was going through, I tell them. And I've never been to any other hospitals or any pharmacy and tell them that. So did you have to like go and then check and then see, like, you know, with the competition, I guess. Yeah.
I live to tell this story, but some of them may not remember me. But when I was a student thinking about this idea, there were places in Gambia where they wouldn't even let me come in to talk to them.
Seriously?
Right? Oh, yeah. Because to them, it's just like, it's one of those things where they safeguard their businesses. So there's a lot of people in the pharmacy industry, they may not remember me now, but when I was a student, they actually refused to even have a conversation with me. When I just wanted to learn to see what was going on.
Because you're asking questions.
Yeah. But, you know, some of them were kind enough to be like, sure, come see, because it's one of those things where once you see one or two, it's not a lot to see. I understand the industry. Anyways, I specialize in community healthcare, right? So market research, they'll never be honest and open with you understanding what their business model is, because quite frankly, their goal is not to create an environment where competitors come and open up shop. So even the regulations are designed to make it very difficult for somebody to get a license to operate a pharmacy, which is fine. But to what you said, we built the environment. Everything about InnovaRx was intentionally designed for a particular patient outcome. Because we studied how healthcare is done. They don't use a lot of technology. They don't have spaces where somebody could feel comfortable. You don't have active records of your place. We don't safeguard quality. So all these things I just design. And most of the times I tell people in the Gambia, what your competitors are doing, it's not useful information. Just focus on why you're doing what you're doing. And then the rest takes care of itself. But nah, they're not inviting for you asking questions at all.
Yeah, because I remember I told something to one of the person that was like attending to me. And after I told my mom about what I said, my mom was like, "What? Why did you say that?" I was like, "Actually, I trust them. Like I feel comfortable to say that. Maybe in another hospital I wouldn't say, or another pharmacy, but I actually felt to say that, you know, and it was really comfortable, you know, and all the results I got, I think I did check my blood test. I even did just a HIV test. I did everything, the things that I've never done before, I never trusted to do, you know. So it was a very great experience, man.
Well, you're a role model, because it's especially a lot of young men, we don't check as often, man. So just the fact that you did that says so much about you and your commitment to your health. But no, that's how, and you know, for 4 years now, it'll be 4 years in December. You know, alhamdulillah, we've never had an issue of like any kind of privacy breach. We have an electronic health record system that's the best, not only in Gambia, but in the sub-region. There's very few electronic systems. So it's been a blessing just trying to maintain a standard, because trust is everything in healthcare. The moment you had an experience and you felt that we broke your trust, we could never take care of you. We could never take care of your family members. And Gambia is small, man. So things like that, I'm really serious about.
So if you were today, Dr. Ismail, to be given, for example, the opportunity to be in the Ministry of Health, for example, would you take that role and actually fix or challenge some of the issues that we're dealing with, especially in the healthcare sector?
I wouldn't take it. Not today, not ever. And I'll tell you why. I am more effective if the government, any government in Africa, allows me to execute my healthcare vision in partnership with the government. Because the health system in the Gambia, we have an emergency care system. I think there's people that could run it, right, that better. What we need to do is, what we do for a few people, we could do it for 2.5 million people very easily. And I don't need to have access to the health ministry to do it. It'll be nice if they're more supportive and they make the environment conducive. And that's not only in Gambia, that's any country in Africa. But honestly, to run it, man, innovation is faster, more efficient in the private sector than it is in the government. So anybody who wants to impact change, you do it in the private sector in collaboration with the government, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. But InnovaRx, I think we've always been underutilized by the Ministry of Health, and that has kind of impacted how fast we could kind of help a lot of people with the services that we provide.
Because I feel like I don't know, how is your business? I guess, like you said, is going good so far. But with everything that's just going on in our country, with, there's just a lot of shit, I would say. Like, because in my mind, like, people like you, people like Nene Sala, for example, having certain position, not maybe seeking the power, but just kind of giving the power, you would be able to kind of influence or maybe change. But I guess what you're saying also with the governments, maybe it's very hard to deal with, government.
Chana, I could tell you this, there's very few problems in the Gambia that the solution is not already in the Gambia. Honestly, most of our problems when it comes to lack of access to quality medications, the children who died from the cough syrup situation,
that was terrible.
Up country, a lot of the solutions are already in the country. They just need to allow people who could execute the solution to be able to execute it. Right. Yeah. Which is why it's always laughable when we get these foreign consultants that come down to tell us certain strategies on how to solve it. But there's a private sector company that could honestly not only provide a lot of opportunities, but we could solve a lot of our problems as well, too. But, you just hope, my sister, a lot of people don't know this. My sister was Minister of Health in the Gambia. So I understand the challenges of that ministry in a way that very few people do. And I would be rendered ineffective for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, one of the other things about you is that you're a very active person. I always see you doing burpees and a lot of crazy things in the gym. You're into CrossFits, which is something I'm so afraid of. Like I train a lot, but that's an area I'm like afraid of. You know what I mean?
It's big where you are. You should join.
Man, I don't know. Like, I haven't really had the time to work out a lot these days. I've been trying to change, actually. Couple of days ago, I was just going through a lot of stress, and when I did 100 burpees, and I've been feeling it like the whole week, because normally I only do like regular, simple bodybuilding, just lifting weights. But for the last week, I think maybe just because I was talking to you, I was just watching a lot of CrossFits, because I saw what you were doing on your Instagram the other day with the pregnancy, the ball that you guys had strapped in your, and it was just like, I was like, maybe I should get into this. I mean, it just looks very. It's very stimulating. You know what I mean? It feels like you really get something out of your workout, and like not only physically, but mentally also.
More mentally.
Yeah. Like, so how do you balance your fitness, your workout, and your daily work and parenting? Like, how do you balance everything together? Yeah.
I think everybody who knows me and loves me knows that I cannot exist without fitness, right? Because I need it for my mental health. I mean, CrossFit has saved me from depression, from the darkest moments in my life, because it really allows your body to get used to discomfort in a way that's therapeutic. And part of it too, like, I have hypertension, right? As in, I take medications for high blood pressure every single day. So genetically, I know that I am at risk of dying early because of my family line. But physical fitness, I've always been active, basketball, but CrossFit specifically, it shapes your relationship with discomfort, because for 1 hour or 1.5 hours of the day, you go through so much physical discomfort that any discomfort that you had mentally goes away.
True.
So it becomes something that calibrates you. If you're feeling down, you'll get stronger. Your body will look better. Those are just byproducts. But it's just the discomfort, the relationship with discomfort, being able to put your body through something and mentally you get rewarded for it. I think that's always been the benefit. But also there's a sense of community, because if you notice as well too, all the exercise, the group, you're doing it in groups.
Exactly.
So these people, anytime as human beings, anytime you go through something difficult as a group, you become stronger. You get more emotionally connected to each other. Your body even starts producing serotonin, which gives you a sense of belonging. So most CrossFit communities become your real community of support, because even if you're working out and you're typically talking a lot, but you're not talking a lot, your classmates will tell you like, hey, what's going on, X, Y, and Z. So you build that community of support. And physical activity in this day and age, there's so much science and research out there that says you have to strength train. You have to get your heart rate high enough where honestly, anybody who's not doing it, you're missing out on one of the most potent ways of living a long life. There's a direct link to how long you live and how physically active you are. There's a direct link.
I guess, it's true what you said, because, exercise, physically and mentally, it's very effective. But what about for those people, for example, because, mental health is something that's not really talked about a lot. And like, I've been training for like the last 10, 15 years, probably. But somehow I've always dealt with certain mental health issues, and sometimes it surprises you. You're just like, what the hell is happening? What is going on with my mind? And sometimes I'm like, maybe I'm not very fit. Maybe I haven't put my body enough stress. Like, how can they deal with talking about the mental health also? Like, how can they start some sort of a discussion or a group to be able to feel free to talk about these things?
I think a couple of things. You always find a safe space. One of the hardest things for people is being able to identify what your safe space is, and who do you trust enough to be vulnerable with. In the beginning, it's easier to be vulnerable with yourself, as in being able to describe what it is that you're feeling, to understand it, right? Most people, that's why solitude, and I talk about this in my book too, in terms of how I've dealt with depression in the past, because part of running a business too, you're going to go through moments where you will go into depression because things are just not working out. You're stressed out, you're losing money, you're X, Y, and Z, right? So part of the goal is people like us talking about it, where somebody could see me masculine, I'm in the gym, I'm fit, but like, hey, I go through depression certain times. These are things that don't make you any less strong. If anything, it's suffering, because every human being is suffering. Even from a spiritual philosophy, suffering is a part of life, right? So it's understanding, one, there's nothing wrong with you, us talking about it enough, but also it's nice to talk about it, but there's also tangible things that you could do to find coping mechanisms, right? And that's where a professional comes into play. Speaking to a therapist, I realized early that, okay, CrossFit is a very potent coping mechanism for me. So I'm not going to remove that from my life. Some people, it could be running. Some people, it could be writing. Some people, it could be spending time with their loved ones. That allows them to come back and center themselves a little bit better, right? So I think every person has to go on a journey alone to figure out, okay, what leads to moments where there's a chemical imbalance in my system? Because that's what depression really is. It's a chemical imbalance. And what are some of the things that inject those happy feeling chemicals in my system that allows me to not fall under the threshold where I don't feel like doing anything because I am in a depressed state, right? So most people, if they understand that the condition itself, to know that, okay, it's normal for us to dip in and out of depression, right? Which is why clinically, the way they actually measure depression is for how long have you felt a certain way? Because they know most human beings will dip in and out of just not feeling okay. But if it stays around for a very long time, then you need an intervention to kind of at least allow you to be the best version of yourself. Because I think everybody has a best version of themselves when they're okay.
What about like antidepressants? It's like it's a medication that they give a lot of people that go through these things. But how effective are they? Like,
so going back to medications, there's no such thing as a pure medication that does only good. Like even somebody who has high blood pressure, there's side effects to it, right? Antidepressants, the way they work, most of the times, they just increasing those neurochemicals, those chemicals in your brain that allow you to feel uplifted or be in an okay mood. That's all they are doing, right? Serotonin, a lot of people, if you study the history of serotonin, it's a chemical in our body that's a happy chemical. If it's low, we get depressed. If it's high, we're not depressed. So all antidepressants do is allow your body to create and keep as much serotonin as possible to prevent you from being depressed, right?
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it has certain side effects, or you have to take it for a certain amount of time before you see the maximum effect of it. But it's not adding something, it's not changing, it's actually tricking your body to produce more happy chemicals. That's all most of these antidepressants do, is just increase happy chemicals that, are naturally existing in us. But some of them do come with side effects, which you should be aware of.
It ends like I know people who've like lost their life, with depression and all these things. So it's a serious thing. But how do we get serotonin naturally in our body? Like, what are other ways can we get it?
Most of our serotonin is produced in our stomach. Most people don't know that.
It's not in the brain.
The brain needs it, but you make most of your serotonin in your stomach. So what you eat matters so much, which is why there's a direct correlation with bad eating and actually not feeling happy all the time. It's so interesting. Sarah, there's a couple of chemicals that if you want to understand how magnificent God is, just study neurochemistry and the different neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, how it helps regulate us, right? So sometimes, like, even having a conversation that is uplifting, your body naturally produces more serotonin, right? Because all your brain is just getting signals to kind of keep certain things, which is why going back to even exercise, endorphins and things of that nature. So it's just, there's a lot of ways that your body produces serotonin, but sense of belonging, identity, what you eat, all those factor into your serotonin levels. Even though some people may be at a disposition also to always have lower serotonin. But neurochemistry is one of the most beautiful aspects of the human body. And serotonin, most of the times you're producing more serotonin from your stomach. So your gut health, what you put in your system, the type of food that you eat, all of them play a role. Yeah, it matters.
I notice a lot. Like, I always say to my wife, like when I don't feel good sometimes, I'm like, we need to change our diet. We're not eating very good, and most of the times if I keep track on what I eat and how I eat, if I'm eating always rice, or maybe I had a burger or some cookies over there, next thing you know, I'm just sitting on the couch, probably just not feeling good. And you're like, why? And I know, and it seems like a lot of it has to do with what goes into your body, So the exercise, the diet, and then the vitamins,
and fasting.
And fasting.
Fasting is one of the most beneficial things a human being can do for their health. Every single day, you have to go through a period, at least, I recommend 12 to 14 hours where all you're consuming is water. Fasting is the only way your body gets rid of toxins. It's the only way your body gets rid of cells that are not strong enough to do what they need to do. Which is why all these things, even taking it back to religion, there is a scientific correlation to why God made sure he recommended certain things, because the human body needs it as well too, right? So fasting too, honestly, most people, I tell you, just fast. And I do intermittent fasting every single day. So when I eat dinner, I don't eat no later than 10 p.m. at night. I like to make it 9. I will fast until 3 p.m. the next day, so all I consume is water, just to allow my body to reset. And my first meal is 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. the next day. So I do a 16-8 intermittent fasting. And it's how I, just kind of stay as clear-minded and healthy as possible.
I've done it before, but for me, it's all about sometimes the consistency, just keeping. Like, I'll do a month or 2 months, and then then you find a cookie late night, and all
enjoy
these
that
things.
cookie.
Oh my God, man! It's just there's just certain things that it's so hard. It's like, because I'm a fulla, you know, like we love bread, you know, and I love
my wife is full. I know.
Oh my God. It's like, I tried cutting bread. I think it lasted a week. Next thing you know, I was like, my wife was asking, what are you going for dinner? I'm like, don't worry. I'm going to buy a baguette and I'm going to put two eggs in there. And that's enough. Because, you know, it's such a hard thing. Or having a croissant in the morning. I'm just like, what am I doing? But all those things, it's like just kind of repeating the same mistakes, because I do see it in my body, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? Because I have this thing I get away with. Okay, I already look good, so I don't need to, in my mind. Not that I say it to everybody, but it's like that feeling is like, don't worry, next week. You
can snap back.
Procrastinating all the time. Yeah, but recently I feel like, you know, because I always take vitamins. You know, vitamins something that I well, actually, when I moved to Sweden, that's when I really respected vitamins, because moving to this country was so cold, you know, and then like, I feel like just things were not working chemically, like, you know, in my brain. And when I started taking ashwagandha, magnesium here, I think, I recently started taking L-theanine with caffeine, and like, and it's just working like fascinating. It's like, like this feels good. So with that, I think it just has to come then with the diet, you know, and then hopefully it's all good. Yeah.
And you understanding your body. Once you get an understanding of your body, and I think especially for us men, our relationship with food, nutrition is so different from women as well too. So the sooner you could understand your body, I mean, even if you want to have ice cream, cookies and ice cream at like midnight one day, it doesn't change the grand scheme of things, because for the most part, inconsistency is better than nothing, right? And your body will always tell you when you feel okay, right? But nutrition is so important, man. Nutrition and movement is so important.
Yeah, man, it's great. But I guess it's gonna be just my final questions, you know. So what are your aspirations, you know, for Gambia, for Africa, you know, like what is that something that you kind of envision for and contribute for a brighter future?
Man, that's, I'm always gonna describe it based on the Gambia that your daughter and my daughter is gonna inherit. Because I don't think the Gambia that I want, I will see it in my lifetime. I don't think the Africa I want, I will see it in my lifetime, which is one that we transition from fighting poverty to actually maintaining prosperity. Most countries, especially in the Scandinavia, in the USA, they're maintaining prosperity. Nations like Sweden, nations like the USA, they're maintaining prosperity. They're not fighting poverty. There's a big difference psychologically, but I think also changing the way we're doing business in Africa, because I think one of the biggest limitations of Gambia and Africa is because there is a Gambia, there is a Senegal, one citizenship with every single person. That's what the vision of Africa that I hope it would be from an economic and moral standpoint. And the only way we do that is companies, opportunities for people to earn a living wage. That's just a hope. And none of that includes me into the picture. So by the time we live our lifetime and leave this earth, Gambia could only be 100 years old. Any nation or continent, if you see where they were at year 100 and where they were at year 56, you would also feel the frustration that we feel in the Gambia, which is why right now, anybody who wants to do something on the continent, if you miss the next 20 years window, you would miss out on Africa's greatest opportunity to create wealth, which is why everybody is coming to Africa. So even if we don't live to benefit from that, I would want your daughter, my daughter, to have a right and stake in that prosperity, because our future generations will depend on what we do today and who's going to own Africa, in the future.
That's a great answer, man. That's a great answer. Yeah. But Dr. Ismail, thank you so much for coming to join me in in this podcast. I learned a lot from you.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, appreciate it.
And what you're doing is creating your speaking voices. I think you're providing a lot of value. And I really hope your listeners are also sharing it with a lot of the young Gambians, because this is content and videos on TikTok of cats playing the piano or memes and things of that nature that's consuming a lot of our society. So I'm just proud of you, and I'm sure that's good work.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna keep pushing, man. I'm gonna keep pushing.
Yes, and I'll make sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'll send you a copy. Just shoot me your address, and I'll send you a copy today.
I'll do that. I'm gonna call you after I hang up because the internet is having a lot of interference. So
sounds good.
Yeah, I think we're just gonna end it here. So,
okay, awesome.
Thank you for joining me, man. All right,
thanks a lot, man.
All right, bye everyone. Yep. Bye.